This happened a few years ago in southwest Georgia, about an hour and a half south of Atlanta. My mom was a police officer at the time, and she told me the following. So they get a call to one of the bad parts of the town, and it came from a father who said his daughter was on drugs. So, my mom, we'll call her K, and her partner, we'll call her D, walk into the house and find the daughter sitting on one of those old school couches with the legs that make it stand about 4 to 6 inches off the ground. So the woman is just sitting there, just blankly staring in front of her. My mom said the woman suddenly started freaking out and screaming, "He's right there! He's right there! He's coming!" So K and D start to reach towards the woman to calm her. Suddenly, it's as if something under the couch grabs the woman and tries to yank her underneath the couch. Kay said that there's no way the woman could have faked this by the way her ankles bent underneath her and the force behind it. So Kay and D grab the woman and are literally playing tug of war with whatever was pulling this woman. Suddenly, and as quickly as it starts, the force just stops. The woman is screaming and crying, and the father is still just saying his daughter is crazy and on drugs, so they take the woman to the hospital. Here's where it gets even more crazy. So, the hospital does a drug test and finds 0 drugs in this woman's system. Turns out this woman went to a local church earlier in the evening, begging for help, but the church turned her away, thinking she was on drugs as well. Anyway, the woman gets admitted to the psych ward for a few days. What happens next is going to sound fake, but I swear on my kids it's not. A few days later, the house burns to the ground. Nobody was inside, thankfully. The woman was still admitted, and the father got out before it was too late. They were unable to determine the cause of the fire. I recently met my mother's old partner, D, and asked her to tell the story because I didn't fully believe my mom. Well, she recounted it, almost identically to how my mom did, with the exception of her saying that when they had a hold of the woman on the couch, she remembers just repeating the Lord's Prayer over and over and over. She said she's never booked it so fast out of a house in her life. The story crosses my mind at least once a week and scares me still every single time. This happened to me 5 years ago. I've tried to forget about the whole thing, but the more I try to forget what I saw, the more I remember it. For a little bit of background, I'm a male. I'm 33 years old, married, and have 2 children with my wife, who is currently 7 months pregnant with twins. At the time of the story, I was 28 years old and was engaged to my now wife, Stephanie. At the time of the story, I had been a police officer for 8 years. I had seen some disturbing things. What I'm about to tell you takes the cake of the most disturbing thing I've ever seen. It was the summer of 2018. It was a warm and humid evening in the middle of July. I was in my patrol car responding to a domestic violence call between a male and his girlfriend. I thought nothing much about it and went to the address provided. As I drove to the address, I thought, why in the hell can't couples just love one another? I continued to drive to their address, and let me tell you, their address was the longest address I've ever driven to. At this point, I had been driving for 30 minutes. I was literally across town because I was driving on dirt roads. I finally got to the house where the couple lived. It was an upstairs house. I parked my car, got out, and walked to the house. I got on the front porch and knocked on the wooden door. The door opened almost immediately, and there stood a woman who was probably in her mid-20s. She had knife cuts on her face, so I guessed her boyfriend had used a knife as a weapon. The woman was saying to me, "Officer, he's trying to kill me. Please help me." After hearing her statement, I went inside and said, "Police, show me your hands." I had my gun drawn and searched for this woman's boyfriend for 15 minutes. I finally decided to check the main bedroom upstairs. As I walked up the stairs, I felt the feeling of dread, so I gripped my gun very tightly as I walked into the bedroom. I walked into the bedroom, gun in my hand. I said, "Police, show me your hands." I heard a voice say, "I'm right here, officer. You want me? Here I am." I turned when I heard the voice. I saw a man with a knife in his hand. I had no problem putting the man in handcuffs. I led the man to my car and put him in it. I went back to the woman. I told her her boyfriend will be going to jail. She thanked me, and I saw tears run down her knife-cut face as she hugged me. I asked her if she needed any EMS. She told me no, and we said our goodbyes. I proceeded with taking the man to the county jail. I don't know how much jail time he got for assault with a deadly weapon, but it was a long time. I can assure you of that. This was 5 years ago, and I'll never forget how many cuts that woman had on her face from that knife. It was the most disturbing thing I've ever experienced in my 13 years of being a law enforcement officer. I'm a police officer here in Manchester, and like most of my colleagues, I've been having a great deal of trouble policing the coronavirus lockdowns. A second round of increasingly harsh lockdown measures were introduced by the government fairly recently, and although I'm all for trying to contain and manage the virus, it's obvious that people are getting pretty sick of it. We've had to attend more and more incidents of people gathering in groups that exceed their social bubbles, and people are really not happy about us showing up. I can promise you, the last thing we want to do as police is stop you from seeing your friends and family for the first time in months. But we have a job to do, even if we don't like doing it sometimes. But recently, I had to attend a call about a social gathering that ended a lot worse than just a few harsh words being exchanged. A call that, at one point, I didn't think I'd walk away from. So like I said, we get a few calls coming in from the Levensheim area about a house party that's gotten out of control. Not only are these people gathering way in excess of the social distancing laws, but they're flaunting it, shouting at neighbors, playing loud music, and generally making a nuisance of themselves. The property the party was occurring in was known to us as an Airbnb, and was located in what was usually a very quiet area. Now, there were no concrete figures relayed to me by the radio, but before I pulled up to the house, I was told there would be around 15 to 20 people at the property, but in reality, it was more like 200. Even when most of my available backup had arrived, we were still dangerously outnumbered. And in the time it had taken for them to get there, the people at the party had noticed I was there, and they most certainly weren't happy about it. Before we approached the property, I'd had all manner of abuse thrown at me. Not to mention having a number of items literally thrown at my car, too. I didn't think it would be an easy call, but what happened next gives me the sweats just thinking about it. We managed to get into the house to turn down the music, before informing all in attendance that they would have to leave. Not a single person is wearing a mask. The only people with facial coverings are police officers. I won't get into the politics of mask wearing here, but let's just say I was not too pleased to see so many young people just flagrantly ignoring some pretty serious government health guidelines. Most younger people are also pretty scared of the police, and a lot of the noisy house parties I've had to attend calls to have ended in all the kids just legging it out of various doors and windows. The party just sort of stopped itself, but never have I been to one where no one seemed to care that we were there. We weren't even the least bit intimidating to them, and very quickly, the atmosphere went from tense to resentful to violent. There was this feeling in the air that the kids knew they had us totally outnumbered, and it was most definitely not enjoyable to see them start slowly realizing it. They started ignoring us, sitting back down, telling us to F off. One lad even went on this big rant about he couldn't even have a birthday or a proper Christmas, and now we're taking this away from him too? He was quite impassionate, really. I understood where he was coming from, but I didn't understand why he and his friends were so quick to do something as reckless as attack police officers. One lad tried to punch an officer from behind as he was talking to another two kids. He then tries to get hold of this lad, and the kids' mates jump in. The last thing I heard before things descended into chaos were all kinds of younger male voices saying things like, "Get him! Get him!" Then there's just a flurry of bashing and shouting. It was all batons, tasers, and pepper spray, anything to keep those kids off of us, to keep them from gathering up and just kicking the crap out of us right there in that house. I remember fighting towards the area of the kitchen that had all the kitchen knives in one of those fancy holders, then just locking that down so none of the kids could get a hold of a kitchen knife. We had a really hard time that night, but it could have been so much worse. If all those teenagers had really made the joint decision to actually go for us, there's no way we'd have been able to fight them all off. And when people lose control like that and start being little more than a mob, people lose their lives too. And we're extremely lucky that we managed to keep a lid on things. Police officers have died in similar situations like that before, and I'm sure there will be plenty of times in the future when they'll be in danger of a mob violence again. But to be there, actually experiencing that level of chaos and fear in the flesh, it's something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. It was really horrific, and now we're stuck in a pattern of that sort of behavior. It's only going to get worse with the lockdowns. Like I said, I understand the need for them, but we as police are stretched to our absolute limit right now. And sooner or later, we're going to have to deal with another situation where a lot of angry people start to lose control. Be it from fear or stress, or just being cooped up at home. I really hope I'm not there to see it again.